I hit record. That's important, isn't it? So, Chris and Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today. Chris, let's begin with you. Do you want to tell us your story and Lynda's story?
Yes, that'd be great. I want to tell you a story about my wife, Lynda Soltysiak. Lynda was 55 when she died and never missed a doctor's appointment or never didn't attend a screening invitation. She was educated, a double graduate and a diploma in management. She worked in the NHS for 32 years in different roles, helping others. In her spare time, she did voluntary work at Guy's Hospital, helping sick children. And she was an excellent choral singer, which is important for this story later, given her time basically for charity at concerts like at Trafalgar Square at Christmas and singing in Covent Garden. In some ways, this is a tragedy because it was a loss of a very talented person, not just my wife. So I think it'd be probably good if we just discuss some of her symptoms and what happened to her, if you'd like me to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Take us back to the start.
Well, as I said, she was a choral singer, and her first symptoms were a cough and a sore throat, and she couldn't get rid of it. So she went to the GP many times. First, they thought maybe it was streptococcus or something that was just, an infection. And then they even sent her to Guy's Hospital for a scan. But when the scan came back, they couldn't really find anything, just perhaps a slight narrowing of airways. And they said that she had asthma. Right. So the GP prescribed her the inhaler. She didn't have asthma at all, as far as I'm concerned. It was kind of like a symptom of her immunisation breaking down. She then had a lot of pain, particularly in her back and her left hip, and had to use a stick. So she went back to the GP again, and the GP said, "Oh, you've probably got muscular pain. I'll send you to physiotherapy." So loyally, she went off to physiotherapy and had various sessions. We then went on holiday to Spain, but she was in a lot of pain and agony. And also, in about 2019, 2020, she started to complain of a pain under her right arm. So, although there was no obvious lump, Lynda was slightly obese, and she was working all hours, typical NHS sort of person. So she didn't really join the cancer two-week pathway until probably too late. I actually said to her, because we had some resources, would you like me to pay for you to go private? But she said no. She was enthusiastic about the NHS, and that the NHS was sending her to physiotherapy anyway. So that's what she believed was wrong with her, okay? Yeah. Finally, after we went on a short holiday to Ireland, because her family was Irish, she noted a slight discoloration in her nipple and went straight to the GP, as she should. When she got her mammogram results, they called us both in and said she had stage 4 cancer and was going to die. So bang, yeah. Tremendous shock. She had to start chemotherapy straight away. She had aggressive triple positive cancer, which some people might know what that is, but basically it multiplies quite quickly. What was worse is also when she went for the full body scan, and it was clear that she had cancer in the liver and the bones, and had lived with this for some months, the radiotherapist, thinking she was an NHS employee, said to her, "How come you're not already in chemotherapy as you're so severe?" She broke down in tears with the realization that perhaps her life was over, and that shouldn't have happened. The doctor should have perhaps talked to her about that. So it was a litany of just mistakes or opportunities lost. She was very brave and made certain she brought all her family Christmas presents that year. She tried to see all the family, which was exhausting, and she was sick in the sink after going out to see her dad one time, but hid that from everyone else. She was meant to have chemotherapy as soon as possible, but it was near Christmas. and the NHS shut down. It just didn't give her an appointment. I had to chase the appointment, which I managed to get eventually by contacting the consultant. But at that time, if you remember, it was a time of COVID, and she got COVID as well on top because she was not properly suppressed, and I could hear her struggling and dying slowly at night, coughing and wheezing and fighting for life. And even now, it gives me a bit of trauma, having to lay with somebody like that, and you're so concerned as a carer. As a carer, you have to be so strong. You have to pretend, actually, that you're not affected by this, but of course you are. You have to say, oh, we will make it together. We will go on holidays in England, even though perhaps you can't travel, and we will enjoy the times in between the chemotherapy sessions. And it was incredibly difficult. But eventually, she was extremely ill. She gave absolutely everything, but cooked me Christmas dinner because she loved me so much and wanted us to have that special time together. But it totally exhausted her. And she said to me, hubby, I feel totally washed out. So she took herself to bed, and in that period, she really declined. I should have really just called the ambulance, to be quite honest, and I have great regrets, and I had to have therapy about that perhaps I wasn't a good husband. And I got her up to go to the chemotherapy, but she died on the steps of a heart attack, massive heart attack. She was just so exhausted. And I was quite angry about that because the CNS, or the nurse, never told us that actually about 5% of people actually do die from cancer problems, related problems, either heart attacks or so on. Right. And when she was in A&E, they found that her potassium, etc., was exceptionally high, and that's probably what had induced it. The cancer can affect your electrolytes and how your body system works. And the consequences of that were huge. I had to hold her hand. The ambulance came. They got some revival from resus, but we managed to get to the Royal London. But I had to turn off the machines and hold her hand and say goodbye. When I came home, all the fluid was obviously all on the steps when they tried to resus her. And it was suddenly empty and lonely, and I was just on my own. And I thought, how did this happen? So I started to investigate a little bit about cancer. And I realized that a lot of opportunities had been missed. She'd been to occupational health in her work. She had that initial scan in Guy's. She'd been back and forward to the GP a number of times, but each time was fobbed off or not investigated properly. Somebody once, they had to have a critical incident because of the way she died so suddenly. And privately, I won't mention this person's name, but they said if she'd had an MRI scan as part of her physiotherapy, she might well have been alive today. And what was really bad as well is that about a week after she died, I then got her letter to come to breast screening, a 3-year recall. She'd been previously, obviously, to all the other tests because she was NHS and was very compliant. But I thought, that's really just poor administration. But it also made me realise that the whole screening programme is broken. If it had been like any other country in Europe, she would get screened every 2 years, and she probably would have been alive, to be quite honest. She got the aggressive cancer in the 3rd year and fell through the net in the gap, if you like. There was an investigation. I did think about suing the NHS for lack of care, but I'm very much a person, as I also work with the NHS, that wanted to make a difference and for people to learn something from her life or her experience. That's why I wanted to make this podcast. There are a number of things I would say, and we did discuss this with the GP a little bit, and I don't want to be critical of GPs, they're under tremendous pressure. But there are certain risk factors for cancer, and I want other people to know these if they don't realise them already. One was that my wife was overweight and stressed and had a high breast density. Sometimes it's not always detectable to initially find the cancer or to find the lump. And recent research shows that maybe you should have an ultrasound with mammograms, not just a mammogram. She previously, and I'll be quite open about this, been on the pill, but had not had any children, and that's another risk factor. I found also that she was menstruating at a late age. She was over 50, and she had had cancer in the past, but no one had ever done any genetic screening on her. You know, there's an argument that GPs should do that, but they just don't, you know. So there was a lot of risk factors that perhaps could have been looked at, but they never were. So I don't want to be angry about it, but I do feel that others need to be warned. There are some clear messages I want to give people as part of this podcast and maybe discuss with you.
Yeah, go for it.
One is that cancer is difficult to detect. It's not so simple. But if you have any doubts about your health, get a proper scan. Argue for that. Nowadays, you have something called the Rapid Diagnostic Centre. Lynda didn't have that, perhaps, and the GP was not keen to send people off for unnecessary scans. But just a CT scan or an MRI scan would have saved her life. My wife was very accommodating, and she was NHS employee, so she didn't want to trouble people unless she was really sick. So perhaps that was her fault, but it killed her. You know, so be a bit forceful with the GPs. Always attend your screening appointments. There's still an awful lot of people that don't go because they're scared or whatever. Digital mammographies are much better than it used to be, and there's a lot less false positives. My wife was compliant on that, but as I said, she fell between the net between year 1 and year 3. Discuss with people about what the side effects of cancer can be. My wife's electrolytes were just messed up, or the inside of a blood test. If she'd had blood tests, maybe they would have realised actually that she was susceptible at risk of other complications, like having a heart attack and a massive stroke. And don't hesitate, like I did, to take someone to A&E. If they're feeling very unwell, particularly once you've got a diagnosis of cancer, take them straight away to A&E, and don't feel that it's going to be a burden. We were kind of hanging on for those appointments, you know, those regular chemo appointments, and then be in the system. Yeah. But maybe she might have lasted a few more months. I trouble myself about that now, because at least the death was relatively quick. But the consequences were huge as a result of the sudden death. But maybe that's better than lasting a year or 2 years and suffering. I'm not certain. But anyway, I would say to everyone, don't hesitate. Just go to the A&E. And don't rely on something called the CNS. She had a CNS, but I tried ringing 2 or 3 times, never could get hold of them. And at Christmas time, the NHS just shuts down. So be mindful of that. Also, a little bit, and there's not anger speaking here, but don't be afraid to complain. You know, I think we're all a bit scared of doctors, or they've got power or whatever. But you're the person that has the user experience or feels unwell. You have to express that. And if you're of, say, the Asian community or black community and need someone to advocate for you, go and get it. If you think about it, my wife was educated, white, part of the system, and still ended up dead. So I really want to passionately encourage other people to get the help they need. And also, don't see having a lump when you're in the shower as the only sign of breast cancer. It can be discoloration of a nipple or a start of a pain under the left arm. I realise now that what was happening is that it was getting into her lymph nodes and therefore spreading across her body. and she was starting to feel that. But of course, she'd been told it was just muscular and that there was nothing really much wrong with her, or that she had asthma and so on. So I don't want to be too critical of my wife, but other people, please notice that breast cancer isn't just some massive lump and off you go. I also want to say, seek advice as a carer. I had to get therapy for 1.5 years after the way she died. And I questioned also how she could see acute services, primary care services, GP services, and still not be detected, and also her life saved. And it's a very challenging time, because what people don't realise is that when your partner has got cancer, you have to stop work, and your financial situation changes. I spent a long time just trying to sort out her pensions and the whole probate thing, and you're just left in a total mess. So make certain you have a will as well. If you haven't got one now and you're married, make certain there is one, because mine was void, and I spent ages with the lawyers just trying to sort all that out. It wasn't as simple as you make it out. And also, you're suddenly left both needing therapy when actually the diagnosis takes place. But as I say, you have to hold it in, but maybe you need someone else to talk to about that that's not your wife. And then after that, I found it really hard to get any kind of bereavement counselling. I was fortunate enough to be able to pay to go. But it took me a long, long time to recover and just work out what happened. And for days, I cried. You'd be at home and you kind of think that your wife is going to come home from work for dinner. Yeah. And also, you're isolated a little bit, in terms of a lot of the people don't know how to handle you when you have bereavement, and you've got to arrange all the funeral and all that sort of stuff. It was really, really hard. So my advice is to plug into Carers Network if you can, and perhaps get some advice, or a friend or a family to be with you to manage that process. I found it really, really challenging. I just feel I miss my wife every day. I've actually found another partner now after a couple of years. I've been lucky, but she's always in my head, and many things still trigger me about the loss of her death. Such a talented person who gave so much to other people through the NHS and her voluntary work and her singing and so on. It feels like a tragedy that shouldn't have happened. So I would like to make a difference, and I hope by making this podcast, it will encourage people to look about the symptoms a bit more that they might have, to think about how they have to ask, unfortunately now in the NHS, to be heard and to be seen. The NHS, the government itself, it's not me being critical, say it's in crisis and that people are overworked and so on, and it's overloaded. So unfortunately, my advice is speak up and ask for the screening programs, or go opportunistically if you feel you need to. And I just hope the government will listen, that we need to focus more on early diagnosis, to find out that your wife is just going to die, overnight, and died so quickly. She was dead from diagnosis within 2 months of diagnosis. And then to deal with that when she's only 55. And it's not actually the loss that's the problem. As a carer and as a person that's left behind, it's the future that you have to deal with. We have plans, obviously, to retire at 60 and to travel the world and to do all kinds of things together. And we bought the house together, done without for years, and suddenly it was just blown up. Nothing is there anymore. It's destroyed in like overnight. And coming to terms with that and thinking, well, how are you going to be happy without your partner? We met at university and grew up together and were together 26 years. So it wasn't a short-term relationship. And that's been very difficult to manage. And again, as a carer or somebody that's left behind, you need support and you need things to look forward to. So that's basically my story, and I'm telling it because I love my wife, and the way she died and the way she tried desperately to struggle for life, but didn't get the help she needed or the services she needed, really strikes me. And I want other people not to experience that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are so many things there, Chris. The first thing to say is that it's absolutely natural to look back and think, could I have done things differently? Have some, regrets, or think back to some decisions that you made. I was exactly the same. I have absolutely no doubt from spending 20 minutes with you that you did everything you possibly could, and you supported her in every way that you could. And the notion of you being a bad husband is, I promise you, is not correct. But like I say, it is natural to feel that way, and you are making a difference by talking about it, and that's such a difficult thing to do. Yeah, there is so much there, and so much to me that rings a bell with my experience, particularly as a carer, and an experience after Rachel died, my first wife Rachel. Sarah, what are your reflections on Chris's story?
I think initially it's really important that Chris is doing this, and he continues to keep Lynda's legacy alive by telling her story. Definitely what Lynda went through was a case of misdiagnosis. I used to work in serious incidents, and we would have reported it as a serious incident and investigated the case as the GP did. But I've spent a lot of time with Chris, and I have always worried about his welfare, the support that Chris received as a carer. And I know that Lynda's diagnosis to her passing away was very quick, and I think that also caused a lot of gaps in the care that Chris should have received.
Going back to, you talked about the symptoms that Lynda experienced, right at the very start. That I can think back to when my first wife was diagnosed, and there were things that happened, particularly the pain under the arm, like you mentioned. We didn't know anything about that being a breast cancer symptom back then, because I can remember her going to the GP, and she found a lump in her breast, and then the GP felt under her arm and found a big lump under her arm, and she came home and she's like, well, it can't be good, but I've really got no idea what that means. And we Googled lump under arm, and obviously you sort of find out what it could mean. But it's interesting. Did Lynda, given her experience in the NHS, any knowledge she might have had, did she kind of fear that something was wrong, given the things that she found?
And there was no sign of it. It wasn't so clear cut as that. Trying to think a little bit on my feet here. I think she felt reasonably normal in the early stages, but meanwhile the cancer was slowly killing her. As I said, she had pains, which I think there was some debate whether it was bone cancer first or breast cancer first, but basically it was probably secondary. But it was dismissed because the GP has said, well, it's probably just muscular, you pulled something, And the other thing about my wife was that, and this is obviously deeply personal, and women here will understand, she was menstruating, and she was having quite heavy periods, and that can change how your breasts are and things like that. And so she was slightly putting it down to that actually she was coming to the end of her cycle, being in her early 50s. And maybe that was just all part of the menopause, right? But she was deeply full about that. And actually she should have gone really back to the GP even then because what they found is that she had, when they did the scan, they found that she had a gynecological problem as well, but that had not ever been diagnosed as well. So it can be slightly masked or slightly complicated at first. And then when it really was so obvious, she went straight away. She wasn't like breast aware. She was checking herself and things like that. But too late. It had already got into her vital organs and spread. And they told her there was no cure. They were going to try some special types of chemotherapy. And Barts is well known for providing quite good care in that, and not really being critical on the actual treatment. But too late. And what strikes me the most is how brave she was. You know, she continued working until a week or two before she died, and was worried about projects that needed to be completed. And I wouldn't say she was in denial. I do, in hindsight, think maybe she knew something was up because she wanted to meet all her family, and we moved to Ireland, and we also met her brother and things like that. And as I said, she made an effort to contact people. And one of the things that really struck me after she died is that one of my friends' girlfriends came to stay in the house just to look after me. And we found all these presents all wrapped up with their names all ready to go. And this friend just saw this and just totally burst into tears. Yeah. You know, because even to the end, she was caring about other people and not herself.
That's amazing.
And thinking about that, you know. Yeah. Maybe it was a distraction, I don't know, but that was her nature. Yeah. In some ways, I think her nature may have killed her because she was too accommodating, too kind, and thoughtful for others, and worried about her job and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. She wasn't the sort of person that would tell the GP, don't be bloody stupid, send me for that scan, please. I'm insisting that you do.
Yeah, there's definitely something there around trusting your doctors, isn't there? Because
there is.
And we all do it, exactly as Chris has said. I mean, there's times where I know something's wrong, and then, you go to the GP, and the GP's like, oh, no, it's absolutely nothing, you're fine. And you take their word for it, and you go home. But this is where it's really important that you insist, because your GPs don't know your body the way that you do. Yeah. And this is where, you have to kind of say, actually, no, I know my body, and I know what I'm going through, and I know how I'm feeling. Can you put it on the record that I'm asking and insisting to have a scan of some sort or something? But I think, it's...
So the symptom thing, sorry, Chris, is just a really important piece of this jigsaw, isn't it? Because we were exactly the same as Chris and Lynda, going back to when Rachel was diagnosed. This is the 2016 it was. But, we knew we need to look for lumps, but we didn't really know anything beyond that. And there are so many other symptoms that can indicate not just breast cancer, lots of different kinds of cancers. There are so many other symptoms beyond, the sort of well-known ones. And I think it's really incumbent on us all to understand what those are. And the Alliance does lots of amazing work to educate, lots of education campaigns. But we've all got to take a bit more responsibility, haven't we, to understand our bodies, what's normal, what's not, and what to look out for.
Yeah.
One of the things I would say is that I said that she had COVID, and that finally bumped her off. But at the time, they didn't actually know that it was COVID. They actually diagnosed her as having bronchitis. Right. But as she was on the front line at Guy's and St Thomas's, and we now know that in December, sort of Christmas time, it was earlier than we thought. And obviously, if she'd known the risks there, she would have stayed at home and maybe not have got so imminent eyes suppressed or whatever. Yeah. But just a catalogue of terrible experience, And I think basically she had the cancer for more than a year. Yeah. It wasn't something like, I actually asked the GP to do an audit, and they just said, oh, Lynda turned up. It was obvious that she had needed to go on a 2-week diagnosis, and then she died. And I said, well, that's not a very good audit. Yeah. This woman had this for a very long time,
Where are the points in the last year or two?
Year.
So I wanted to help the Cancer Alliance and also tell her story because so many opportunities were missed, you know. And I think that's quite a common story. I don't think Lynda's alone. There's recently been a thing in the press about how if somebody comes to you 3 times with a common complaint, you should think, well, maybe I do need to check this. But that wasn't her experience, unfortunately.
What was Lynda's take on it all while it was all going on?
Shocked initially,
Yeah.
obviously. Broke down.
Did she feel the same as you did in terms of, you know, the frustration of things not happening?
No. She trusted the doctors 100%. She was talking to me about joining to therapy with me. I found a letter after she died where she'd written to her friends about how she was going to look forward to her retirement. That was 4 or 5 months before she died. She's a very positive person and made the best of every day that she could. And that's why I found it incredibly difficult, because she was my rock in many ways. And also I want to say one other thing about being a carer. People don't realise this, that everyone has a digital memory. So because of her sudden death, I had to get professional hackers to actually get into her computers and actually shut down her memory. You don't think of these sort of things when someone's dying. I don't mean just Facebook, but all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Banks, passwords for various accounts.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? It's extraordinary the amount of stuff. I can remember, to my first wife, Rachel, she died just under 2 years after her diagnosis. So we had a little bit more warning, a bit more time. But I can remember going to the hospital at the Christie in Manchester and having a scan, and the consultant said, you know, we've got the results back, and you know, explained that they weren't great, and he said she had possibly days or weeks to live, and we went home with real urgency to get all that admin done. She wrote down all her passwords, wrote down all her bank account details, you know, did all the things that she had to do to make my life easier, not for her, but to make my life easier. And I think you said something really interesting. You said, you know, about her being in denial. Someone said the same about Rachel, and I can remember somebody else saying, actually, it wasn't denial. The remarkable thing is that they do all these things and they were the way they were, even though they understood. It actually wasn't denial. You know, they understood fully what was going on, but they still did the things that they did.
I had to help her with her emails, and obviously she was very tired, because obviously cancer does make you kind of exhausted. Absolutely not denial. If anything, it was about her being strong for others, so that she didn't upset them.
Yeah.
You know, her family. We went and met her family. I had to take her brother aside and basically say, look, make your peace with Lynda or whatever it is, because she's not going to be here very long. And he was shocked by that, because obviously she'd hid a lot of this stuff from them. Cancer is a terrible disease and really can just leave families totally destroyed, really.
Let's talk about life as a carer, and then we'll get on to life, you know, after Lynda's death as well. You mentioned something that really rang a bell with me, because I've talked a lot about, you know, how I was doing while Rachel was ill, and you know, when people would ask you how you are, and you just say you're fine. I can remember Rachel saying, you know, are you okay? Absolutely fine. You know, the support thing's a slightly different matter, because I really don't feel like the support is there for carers at all. Beyond, you know, I can remember Macmillan handing me a leaflet saying, no, you know, we're here for you as well, and that's about it. But I think men need a bit more than that. We need to, you know, a bit more proactive support. And I think, but the thing is, you know, I look back and I think, you know, I do the same thing again, because I wouldn't ever have wanted her to know how badly it was affecting me, because she was one of those people that found, you know, got really guilty about, you know, her experience and the impact it was having on other people. And I think if she'd have known that I was really struggling in the way that I was, that just heaps it onto her, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So it's very hard to hide that.
Yeah.
And after I did a memorial service, and about 200 people came, and because she was a top choral singer, people from all around the world came, and they sang Ferrari's Requiem for her. And it was fantastic and beautiful. And I did the sort of homily or whatever. it's only then when I sat down, I just totally burst into tears in the church. You know, I was holding so much, really, for her, both when she was alive and even after, to see her pass properly, that it just all came out then. And then I was smashed for months, you know. Yeah. Unfortunately, we also then had lockdown, which made it even more difficult. And my brother also died at that time as well, so it was quite a struggle. And I gave up work to look after her, but then she didn't survive. So life is like so different now than what it was then.
We did an episode of this podcast a few weeks back about breast screening, and it was really interesting. You know, in this part of northeast London, or this part of London, sorry, the take up for the screening program is really low. Really low. It's lower than.
Yeah, but if the screening program was more localised and not done to you by some national body, was perhaps run by Barts, and also the local authorities were more engaged with it.
Yeah,
that's what I thought was what integrated care boards were about.
I think they do. You know, they do offer appointments in local areas, don't they?
I feel it would be better.
Yeah.
You know, it has to be pushed down to people, to the communities, for them to understand it.
Yeah.
And also, as I say, I personally feel it's not regular enough, or there isn't enough opportunities at screening. You look at the Scandinavian countries will have much better outcomes. There's reasons why they do. We're behind, unfortunately, in this country. And I can't change that. But I do feel there are gaps in the system, and it's not as joined up as it could be. So as a result, I'm saying to people, fight your corner and be breast aware.
Yeah.
And ask for services when perhaps you wouldn't normally do that, because it could save your life.
That's so important, isn't it, Sarah? You know, like, as we were saying before, education, understanding your body, and understanding the symptoms.
100%. I think it's really vital that we keep pushing that message around knowing your body. The only person that has known your body the longest is you, because no one else have known you your entire life. Yeah. Right? So it's really important that you know your body and you're able to advocate for yourself in cases where you feel you might be dismissed, or you're not being heard. Or it's important to advocate and say, actually, I agree with you. I know that you're, a medical professional and you've been doing this all your life, but actually, I would still like to insist that you put me forward for this test. And I think the other thing about breast cancer, as Chris has mentioned, is the woman's body goes through quite a lot of changes. Even during the menstrual cycle, you're going through quite a lot of changes. So there's a lot happening at the same time, and it's very easy to put it on it might just be because I'm due to have my period in a couple of weeks. That's why my breast is tender, or that's why I've got pains there. Or muscular, as Lynda was told. I've actually been to the GP once and they were told, oh, no, it's fine, it's just muscular. And I had to insist, saying, breast cancer runs in my mother's side of the family. I want to be put forward. And the GP responded, oh, but you're quite young. And I said, actually, but the statistics have changed. It's happening to younger women now. Yeah. And yes, I'm able to advocate and have that conversation with my GP because I work in this field now. Yeah. If I didn't work in this field, I would have just been, oh, okay, my GP said, so that's fine, I trust my GP. Yeah. But yeah, there's an element there about understanding your body, knowing your body, and just being able to be, I think the word is stubborn, and keep going back and keep pushing.
It's just, we hear it all the time. We hear stories like this where you just know that something's wrong, don't you? Like, you just instinctively, you're not quite sure what, because we're not as educated and well trained, but we just know something is wrong. And if that's the case, keep badgering till you get the answer that you need. I think that's, but it's so difficult, isn't it? You were saying, Chris, an awful lot of people, aren't educated, they're not literate, they're not articulate enough to understand that. They maybe, I don't want to say, we don't want to say don't trust your doctors, do we? Because they are absolutely amazing and they do incredible things. And GPs, we know are under huge pressure, and get so much right and offer such amazing care. But there are going to be times
missed when opportunities,
things are missed and opportunities are missed. And I think that's when
well,
understanding
I think what's interesting
yourself.
There is that as I said, Lynda went to many places,
Yeah, yeah.
and still
There isn't just one part of the system. It's a few.
3 or 4 different parts of the system.
Yeah.
My one regret is I didn't go with her because I would have been more forceful. She accepted what they said to her.
Would you have been more forceful? Are you saying that given that you know what you know now, or do you think you'd have been more forceful then?
Probably somewhere in between.
Yeah.
You know, hindsight is a powerful thing, but also
Yeah.
I would have said, well, she's had the throat, she's had the pain, she's had the arms, she's had all these other symptoms. Don't you think we could do a bit more investigation?
Yeah.
And what happened when she was, for example, the first time went to Guy's and had the scan, and actually they said she had asthma, the GP just shut the case down. They didn't then think, oh, I need to do any more work. That's the end of that. That's the referral done. And then, of course, she comes back and there's no connection. I agree with you. GPs are totally overworked and have a very difficult time, and it is difficult to diagnose people. But I still feel something went badly wrong. You know?
Yeah.
And there's lessons to learn. So that's why I approached it from a clinical audit type point of view, rather than a lack of care point of view. Because I think Lynda was partly to blame, not because she was in denial, but because she wasn't forceful enough. You know?
Yeah.
That was not her nature.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. My wife, actually, my first wife, Rachel, was actually a bit the other way. Like, we were a bit switched in terms of you and Lynda. Whereas she was the one that was quite angry with things about her care, and I was the opposite. And actually, after she died, and you kind of reflect on it, and I've done a lot of talking, the same that you're doing now, and you know, trying to talk to people about things that I felt maybe weren't as good as they could have been, in loads of different ways. And I think that's the way that, you know, I feel I can make an impact, rather than, you know, trying to go after somebody or something or a part of the system. And but it is so interesting to look back on it, given, you know, what I know after spending nearly 10 years of talking about cancer, what I know now compared to what I knew then, and what Rachel knew then, because, you know, we just knew nothing. And I think that's the education thing, isn't it? That
I think I've learned that our system is not the best in the world. You know? And I'd like it to be.
Yeah.
I've been to see my MP about it, and I've also got involved with one or two charities. And also I was involved also for a little while with the Alliance. But it's very hard to make a change. You know? There's a lot of bureaucracy and political difficulties in making change quickly. But I just hope that we can, and that we can improve outcomes for other people.
I mean, there are so many people pushing this, and you know, wanting answers and wanting things to get better. Because we did an episode a couple of weeks ago, one of the episodes where Femi and I talk about the news, and we talked about Denmark. And Denmark had this moment 25 years ago where they said this is not good enough, and they kind of redesigned their whole cancer system. And it's incredible now. You have to be diagnosed or given reassurance within 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks after that you have to start your treatment. So, you know, they're miles ahead in terms of the number of scanners per 100 people in the country. They're miles ahead, and I think there is an awful lot of work to do.
As I say, we're the only country in Europe that screens people on a 3-year cycle. Even in China, they do it on an annual basis as a communist country. And 2 years is probably the science. But we don't seem to be able to change it for some reason. It's just stuck in some committee. The science is not caught up. It takes about 8 to 10 years for people to recognise what the latest theories are. And that's why some of the Scandinavian countries are better, because they not only screen people from top down, but then they have people who are on the ground that are doing opportunistic screening based on risk. And as a result, more people get earlier diagnosis, and then that's cheaper for the whole system, because obviously once you're in treatment, it's very high cost. But there's political and also vested interests in keeping it that way, because drug companies and other people and acute sector care dominates the NHS, whereas actually it should be about prevention and primary care and actually engagement on the ground. And I firmly believe that. And I think, unfortunately, my wife's not here to say that either, but I'm saying it for her.
Let's talk about a little bit about life now, Chris. Because you mentioned you met somebody else now, and I think this is something that I'm really passionate about talking about. I remarried. I got a beautiful 2-year-old twins. Life is very, very, very different to how I imagined it would have been. Just over 7 years ago when Rachel died. How's your life now, and how do you kind of reflect on everything that's happened since?
It's taken me 4 to 5 years. She died really basically 2020.
Yeah.
My health has really declined terribly. I personally have had a lot of medical issues that I never had before.
Yeah.
As I say, I've had some accidents and some falls. When you live alone in your house, and I have a townhouse, I fell down the stairs twice. I busted some bones and done some damage to myself. You don't have a carer or anyone to look out for you, so it's been quite difficult to come to terms with that. My life has changed by trying to help others. I'm less materialistic than I used to be. I was driven and worked 60 hours a week like my wife did and focused, but now I don't care. I think life is about family and about love and about relationships and being kind to others. So I'm working quite hard for my church, and I do a bit of voluntary work for charities. I survive okay financially, but you could always want more, but actually I've accepted that's not my destiny anymore. It's to make the best of the few years I've got left and to value people. So it's been, philosophically and value-wise, it's really changed me. And then in terms of keeping busy, I try to do things that make a difference or give you small pleasures, I constantly get asked whether I'd like to work again, and I do actually work on an advisory board for a medical tech company, but it's not heavy work, and I get phoned all the time when I like a job, and I say no thanks. Some people find that quite strange because they expect people to want more and more money and to work even harder, and if you have children, perhaps you need to do that. But I haven't really needed to do that. I've been focused on doing a lot more travel, and I've done lots of things for my wife to remember her. An example is I gave a bursary to a school for 25 years to help people who are disadvantaged to get a prize for learning history, because my wife studied history at university. I did economics.
Right, fantastic.
I commissioned a composer because she was into music, and a piece of music was written and it was premiered in Covent Garden.
Wow.
And I've done a lot of things, like she had some very valuable papers which I gave back to the National Library in Ireland rather than sell them, because I felt they should be for everyone, not just for, to make money at Sotheby's or something like that. I try and do things that remember her, and obviously I would go and see her grave regularly and pray a little bit and give thanks for what she left behind.
Yeah.
Because she left me quite solvent in the end, I didn't know this, but she had actually filled in an insurance scheme, which when I came home from lockdown, very bereaved, it was on the mat, and it was a payment for her funeral, which she'd already arranged without me even knowing.
Incredible.
So she was very organised, friend of a Clem administrator. And
there was a lot to do. There's a lot to do. Rachel used to call it her death min.
So the answer to your question is it's changed me personally.
Yeah.
I have totally a different future. I haven't lost contact with her family, but as she was Irish, I don't go to Ireland like I used to do.
Yeah.
And there is sadness sometimes. There's still times that trigger you, or music that suddenly touches you.
The music's an extraordinary thing, isn't it?
Or
That's the same for me.
a memory, if you like, that hits you.
It's often unexpected things, isn't it? It's not the big things. It's like a little thing you'll see, or somebody will say something, or you'll hear a bit of music that will take you back to a time, or something like that.
And it feels kind of strange because it feels like a new life.
Yeah.
Like I've had 3 or 4 lives in my
Yeah.
current life. And you can't quite believe that all happened.
Yeah.
And that person is no longer there. For ages, I used to think she was going to be home, or I used to miss her, or I felt that she was with me.
Yeah.
You know, I have a piano in the house, and because she was obviously very musical, I would sometimes think she was playing the piano, or a perfume was in the room, or whatever. I think a lot of people have that kind of feeling that actually when they lose somebody so close, that somehow they're still about for a little while. Maybe it's some sort of psychological thing. I don't have that quite so much now, and I don't dream so much about her either as well. So maybe that's the recovery process. And everyone has a bereavement process that's different. But I really am grateful for her life and for all that she shared with me and educated me about. And I really cherish and value women as a result of her, you know, respect and equality and working with women. May seem like a strange thing to do, but when you've loved and lost, I think you appreciate things a bit more.
Yeah.
In a different sort of way.
Well, Chris, it sounds like you're turning something so awful into an awful lot of positives, and I think it's real credit to you, and I'm sure she'd be really proud of all the things that you've done and all the things that you've said today. It's been really an honour to meet you, and thank you so much for sharing. Thank you, Sarah, as well, for coming along and
Thank you.
talking.
The opportunity.
Thank you very much.